Hello, and welcome back to That AuDHD Teacher. I'm Emily, an early childhood teacher sharing stories, science, and honest conversations about living with an AuDHD brain. Whether you're joining me here for the first time or you've been listening since episode 1, thank you so much for being here. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that these podcasts are based on my own lived experience alongside some general information that I'm sharing. And I just want to say that everyone's experience is different, and this podcast isn't intended to diagnose or replace any professional advice. So, for today's episode, I wanted to talk about autistic burnout. And before I share my own experiences, I thought it would be helpful to explain what autistic burnout is, because it might be a term that you haven't heard before, or maybe you've heard it and you just don't understand what it is or how it differs from regular burnout, because they are different. Every single person experiences stress and some exhaustion from time to time. Autistic burnout is different. Autistic burnout can be understood to be a state of intense physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion. It can develop after prolonged periods of navigating a world that isn't designed for autistic people. It can be a result of constantly masking, which is why I bring this up now about my episode after masking. It can also be a result of managing sensory overload, adapting for social expectations, and using significant mental energy just to get through everyday life. So, unlike regular burnout, which is often linked primarily to chronic workplace stress, and it can improve with a holiday or a small period of rest, autistic burnout can be a lot more pervasive, and it can affect all areas of your life. And recovery often takes much longer because it's not only a result of being overworked, it's more the cumulative effect of living with ongoing demands. So while everyone's experience is different, understanding this distinction is really helpful, because when I went through a period of autistic burnout, it really helped me understand that what I was experiencing wasn't just normal tiredness or stress. It helped me understand why resting alone wasn't enough. And while burnout in general isn't unique to autistic people, because anyone can experience burnout, it's helpful to remember that autistic burnout is a completely different type of burnout. So, for people who are autistic or they have ADHD, there are often a lot of additional factors like sensory processing, masking, executive functioning challenges, and navigating social expectations. All of these things can contribute to burnout. So, for me, when I started looking into autism and I stumbled across autistic burnout, it helped me understand so much, because I just didn't understand why I felt so exhausted. And it didn't matter how many hours sleep I got, or if I took a few weeks off, I just would end up exactly where I started. And everything is just harder. I know that for some people during autistic burnout, they can get skill regression, which is absolutely a real thing. And just basic everyday things become really hard, including managing personal hygiene and things like that. I know for me that my tolerance around sensory processing is a lot smaller than it usually is. So I will get overwhelmed a lot quicker. And also, one of my really classic signs that I'm sort of heading into burnout is my irritability level goes up a huge amount. And just the small tasks of everyday life become really overwhelming to manage. Another thing that can sort of overlap and people do get a little bit confused about is sometimes it can look like depression, but it is different. One of the ways that I could explain the difference is with the things that you enjoy. So, with depression, you no longer enjoy the things that you used to. But with autistic burnout, you can still do the things, but you just don't get the same level of dopamine from them. So, it's a very slight difference, but there is a difference. And it's no wonder that so many autistic people get wrongly diagnosed with depression, because the symptoms do look very similar. I know that before I got diagnosed, I didn't understand what autistic burnout was. I thought maybe I just needed a holiday and I'd take some time off. And when it didn't fix it, I'd be like, okay, what else can I do? I thought maybe I just needed to manage my time better. Maybe I needed a planner. I really thought that I was the problem. And I thought it was just me having to come up with more systems, more coping strategies, and then once I hacked the system, it would be okay. But in the end, it didn't matter. It didn't matter how many systems I created. I was still exhausted. Or sometimes I would recover a little bit, but then if you start going back to things before you're recovered, you will burn out a lot quicker. So it's just like a huge cycle that goes on and on and on. And again, from the outside, everything looked fine. I think if you had asked people around me at the time, they would have just said that I was busy because I was busy, but I was drowning. And I actually listened to an audiobook recently where he described autistic burnout as being underwater. So when you try and move, everything is harder. I thought that was a really relatable way to explain what it feels like. Another thing for me with burnout is it wasn't something that just kind of came on at once and hit me over the head one day. Because autistic burnout is quite often the cumulative stress, it just happens slowly over time. So I couldn't even tell you where it even started, which makes it tricky when you don't know what's happening to you. You're trying to figure out where it all started to crumble, and it just feels impossible. And you can't explain it to other people. I know that when I did try to talk to people about how I was feeling, nobody really understood, and they kind of just brushed it off saying that I would just get used to it, that that's just adult life, etc. But it's really not. There are some really good resources out there that can help you with this if it is something you're struggling with. So I have the Autistic Burnout Workbook by Dr. Neff. Admittedly, I'm not a big reader, but it is helpful to go through just slowly over time and help figure out triggers, help figure out your warning signs, and sort of put a system in place for when it does come. But back before I knew, if I was ever feeling like this, I would just tell myself, it's just been a busy day, or it's just been a busy week, or I just have to get through this next little bit and then it'll settle down, that lie we all tell ourselves. I always thought that there was just another explanation for it. And on the surface, those things could actually make sense, but that never fixed how I was feeling. And I always noticed that it took me much longer to recover from all the little things. So after a full 8-hour day of teaching, I would come home just completely exhausted, and not just physical exhaustion, like mentally and emotionally as well. And not to mention sensory. It also takes me a lot longer to process things. It's almost like I need more hours in the day just to process what's happened. I honestly do not know how some people just come home, make dinner, or go out with their friends and then go to sleep without even having an ounce of downtime. I need like a minimum of 4 hours downtime before I can even go to sleep to then function the next day. And when I say alone time, I mean I need to be completely alone with no noise, no music, no TV, nothing. Just alone, quiet. If it's dark, even better. You can see how on the surface that could look concerning to other people, but it's just what my body needed. I don't know if you've ever felt like you've come home from work and you've just made so many decisions in that day that you actually cannot make another decision. Like even something as small as what should we have for dinner or what should we watch on TV. You think about every single human makes so many decisions in a day. Especially as teachers, we make many, many decisions. We ask so many questions. And then by the time you get home, your brain just feels like it's reached its capacity. And I really thought that everyone felt this way. And yes, people do feel this way to some degree, but not to this level. I've always really struggled with that because I feel the weight of the guilt on me. So, I mean, I'm going to be honest, I don't get invited many places because I have a very small, select social circle. But if I was invited somewhere and I really just didn't have the capacity or energy to do it, I would really struggle saying no, even if I didn't have the energy, because I would worry that people thought I didn't care about them, or that maybe I was just being lazy and I just needed to stop being selfish. But none of that is true. Quite often, I just have nothing left in the tank to give. And I think that that's something that many neurodivergent people carry as well. So not only do they have to carry the weight of the exhaustion, but they have to carry the weight of the guilt as well. And I know for me, I quite often feel like that's just a flaw of mine, like it's just a personality flaw. and I just need to be better. I don't know if other people feel that same way, but the guilt definitely gets me. One of the other things I mentioned earlier is my signs that I'm heading towards burnout. Tolerance and capacity for things is lower. So if I was in a really noisy environment, that would affect me a lot quicker than it usually would. And things like a change of plans would absolutely flip me upside down. And it could be the smallest change as well. And sometimes it could even be something that I didn't even really want to do. But the fact that the plans change would just cause a much bigger emotional reaction than it usually would. I end up having a lot more meltdowns during autistic burnout or when I'm heading towards autistic burnout. I haven't really touched on meltdowns and shutdowns yet, but if you experience them, you will know what I'm talking about. I know I use the analogy of the autistic burnout as like being underwater because I think that's a really good way of thinking about how it feels to be in that stage. It can also be helpful to think of our brains like phone batteries, right? If our phones are at 100% battery and we needed to open an app, for example, no problem. We have heaps of battery left, right? But if our phones are on 5% and we need to open a particular app, our phone might just die. It just cannot do it. And I think that our brains are the same. It's also another good way to describe what it's like being in autistic burnout or heading towards autistic burnout. It's just that the energy available is just so much less, and just every time there's one more thing, that's just another thing that we just don't have energy or capacity for. It's also a good explanation for people for why we need so much rest, because I think people who don't experience this might not understand, because they might think, well, I have this many hours rest and I'm fine. Why can't you do the same? But we're all different. The only way to recover from burnout like this is to rest. And you actually need a lot more rest than you think as well. And for some people, it can last for months. Some people, it can last for years. So I think the worst bout of burnout that I've ever been through, it took me about a year and a half to recover from. And a few months ago, I found myself getting more irritable and I was reaching my capacity a lot faster than I usually would. And that was a sign for me that I was heading towards burnout. And I really didn't want to end up in that place again because it's horrible once you're in it. I just know that it takes such a long time to recover from. I didn't want to go there again. But at the same time, it can feel impossible, right? Because we have things we need to do. I still need to keep going to work. I still need to walk the dog every day. I still need to make food every day. Life has to keep happening. And there are always things that I have to do. So I will drop off any unnecessary things, but there are still things that I have to do. And I find that really, really hard. By the way, if you do have any great tips for autistic burnout, please, please leave a comment and let me know, because it's still something I'm figuring out. And I have a really hard time saying no to things. So even if I am just beyond my capacity, I will still agree to things that I really don't have energy for. And it just gets worse and worse. And as I say, it's a cycle that just keeps happening. And it's really hard to stop that loop. But if this is you, and if you've ever felt like this, just know that it's not you being weak. It's not you not having enough resilience, because those are the things I always used to think. And I used to think I was just failing at being a human being. But it's really not that. It just means that we've been going for too long without the support that we actually need. We've just been carrying too much or giving too much, and we just reach a limit. And that it's nothing wrong with you personally. And that's something that I wish I realized sooner, because I do remember when I reached my last bout of burnout, I had been going, going, going. I was working so many hours a day, and I just reached a point where I felt like I couldn't even live a second of my day without crying, because I was just so exhausted. That was the only thing I could do. And I just want to remind you that not all burnout is the same. Autistic burnout is completely different from regular burnout. I think it's really helpful to distinguish between the two of them, not because having a label is really important, but just to understand people's experiences better and understand ourselves. And if you're kind of wondering, well, like, how do I distinguish between the two of them? With stress, generally, once whatever stressful situation is causing that stress in the first place is over, you'll return back to normal. And it's often something that's temporary. But as I say, autistic burnout can last from months to years for some people, and it affects every part of their life. If you are a teacher experiencing burnout, I really empathize with you because it's not easy. I know, especially being an early childhood teacher, for me, it wasn't like I could just take time off. I have children who have formed relationships to me. I'm a primary caregiver for some of these children, and it is just really, really hard. I honestly look at teachers who still work full time on the floor, and I don't know how they do it because I don't do it anymore. I reached a point where I couldn't. So I just take my hat off to you if you are that, because it's hard. I also know that the first time I had experienced burnout, I wasn't teaching on the floor, but I was working privately in families' homes. And it really confused me because if I took a day off, it would almost be like I was getting FOMO, missing out. So those kind of conflicting feelings really confused me. I knew I needed rest, but it was like I couldn't rest because if I wasn't there, I'd be worrying about what I was missing out on because I did really enjoy it. And that was a really hard part about it all. Now that I know what it is, I realize that both of those things can exist at the same time. And I think in some ways, teaching actually makes burnout harder because it's not one of those jobs where you just leave at the end of the day and never think about anything. Even when your day is officially over, there is so much thinking outside of your work time that goes into it, you know, thinking about children, thinking about what you're going to plan for the next day, reflecting on your day, or just remembering the things that you've forgotten and that you need to do tomorrow. So it's not just like an office job where you can just switch off and never have to think about it. It's one of those things that you carry with you. And that's because teaching is built on caring. And that's awesome. But it's also really hard to balance all of that with your own well being. And I know for me, when I start to head towards burnout or I'm in the thick of burnout, sometimes I wonder if I chose the right profession or career. And I know that there are so many others out there that ask themselves the same question, but it doesn't automatically mean that you've made the wrong decision. I think it's important to listen to what it's telling us because it's telling us that something needs to change, that we need more support, or we need to move into a role that might just be slightly different. Or maybe we need to ask for accommodations or set personal boundaries for ourselves. There are definitely things that you can do, although I do know how hard it is to be a teacher when you're experiencing all of this. And that is one of the reasons why I will never work on the floor again, because I just cannot do it for my mental health. But I think employers also play a really important role in all of this. So I'm based in New Zealand, and a lot of early childhood is private, and that is a whole other conversation. But there is a lot that employers could do there and should be doing there to support our neurodivergent teachers. That is something that I would like to discuss in the future because I think sometimes we hear people say, oh, well, you can ask for workplace accommodations, but nobody actually knows what reasonable accommodations are and what they can even ask for and support. So that's definitely something I would like to talk about. But before we head off today, I would love to leave you with a little reflection. So if we just reflect on how we know when our battery is running low, it's important to recognize that first signal so that you can put support in place before things get really bad, right? For example, for me, my capacity gets lower and I'm a lot more emotional. It might look the same for you or it might look different. It could be that you're struggling to remember things or you're struggling to make decisions. I know it doesn't fix everything, but the awareness is really important just because we can respond to them. I definitely have a lot more to say about autistic burnout, but because I'm feeling a bit flat at the moment, I feel like it is a topic that I'm going to have to come back to in the future. But thank you so much for spending today with me. If today's episode resonated with you, I'd love it if you followed that AuDHD teacher on whatever platform you listen to your podcast on. And if you have a moment to leave a rating or a review, that would be awesome because it helps more people discover these conversations. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. I'm also on Threads now at that AuDHD teacher. I try and share a little bit of behind the scenes, but I'm not that good at doing it. Always happy to connect. And if someone came to mind while you were listening today, please send this episode to them. And as always, be kind to yourself. Until next time, just remember, different doesn't mean broken, it simply means different. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.